Before we dive into this chilling tale, make sure to hit like and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories. You won't want to miss the true, dark accounts I'm about to share. So sit tight and let's begin. It was the summer of 1997. The sun had barely set, and the humid air of New Orleans hung heavy, as if the city itself was holding its breath. I was part of a small group of friends close, but not too close. You know how it is when you're in college, just drifting between people, not really knowing who to trust or where you're headed. We'd been driving for hours, far from the city lights, when we stumbled across something I'll never forget. We were on Route 14, somewhere between the dense woods and the kind of place people forget to visit. The air smelled of wet soil and something metallic, like it had been a while since anyone had set foot there. That's when we saw it. The Carnival. At first, I thought it was some sort of mirage. It had been years since I'd seen a carnival outside of the city. I was more used to the ones on TV with flashy lights, happy faces, and cotton candy. But this one, well, it was different. Is this a joke? Adam said, stepping out of the car and squinting at the rusted gates. The carnival's entrance was barely visible, hidden behind thick trees that seemed to crowd the place. The flickering lights caught my eye, as though they were trying to pull us in, like they were alive. The distant sound of carnival music drifted in the air, soft at first, then growing louder, but it didn't sound right, like the tune had been stretched, distorted somehow. Nina, the most cautious among us, pulled a face. I don't like this. It looks abandoned, but I could see it in her eyes. She was curious, just like the rest of us. The mist was creeping in from the forest as we made our way past the gate, which was barely hanging on its hinges. The place looked forgotten. The rusted rides, Ferris wheels, carousels, the remains of roller coasters all stood eerily still under the moonlight. Yet, I could have sworn I saw one of the carousel horses move. Just a twitch. But when I blinked, it was gone. Let's check it out, I said. Maybe it was the feeling of being so far from home, or the music that called us in. But whatever it was pulling me. I felt something, a deep sense of unease growing in my chest. Maybe it was the old, warped Ferris wheel looming in the distance, or the strange whispers carried by the wind. But there was something about the place that made it impossible to leave. We walked further in, the rusted metal groaning under our feet, echoing across the stillness. There was no sign of life, yet something felt wrong. The air was thick, like it was pushing against us, almost like the carnival itself was waiting. As we approached the heart of the carnival, the music grew louder, and then I saw him. He was standing in front of the old game booth, watching us closely. He was an old man, maybe in his late 70s or early 80s, with a weathered face that looked as though it had lived through decades of stories. He wasn't moving, but his eyes were following our every step. "Who are you?" Adam called out. The man didn't answer at first. He just kept staring, almost like he was measuring us. "We don't belong here," the old man muttered, finally breaking the silence. His voice was low, raspy, and his words didn't make much sense. "This place never truly closes, not for those who seek it." We all exchanged looks. The guy wasn't making any sense. But there was something in his eyes that made me think. He wasn't just some crazy old man wandering around. There was knowledge in his gaze, something that told me we weren't the first to step foot here, and we sure as hell wouldn't be the last. As we walked away from him, the old man's figure seemed to dissolve into the shadows, like he was swallowed by the carnival itself. I tried to shake off the feeling that his words had meant more than he let on, but the air around us grew colder. The flickering lights above us seemed to blink in rhythm with the distorted music, sending chills down my spine. We pressed on, unaware of how deep we were about to fall into something we couldn't get out of. Something that had been waiting for us. We walked deeper into the carnival grounds, the thick mist wrapping around our ankles like cold fingers, pulling us further into the unknown. The sound of the music grew louder, but it still didn't sound right. It was as if the melody was trying to tell us something, but we couldn't quite catch the words. The air was heavy, almost as if it was thick with memories or something darker. It was Mark who noticed the carousel first, the one that had been spinning earlier. It was still turning slowly, but now the horses worn, their paint peeling off like old skin, seemed to sway in time with the music, even though no one was riding them. The flickering lights above the carousel cast an eerie glow on the broken-down ride, highlighting the faces of the horses, their expressions frozen in an eternal twisted grin. "I'm starting to think this place is haunted," Mark said, his voice shaky, but there was a forced laugh at the end, as if he was trying to convince himself it wasn't as bad as it felt. But we all knew it was. Nina was standing behind us, visibly uncomfortable, her eyes darting around nervously. "This isn't normal. Let's just leave." But I couldn't bring myself to leave. There was something about this carnival, something that was calling me, pulling me deeper into it. I wanted to see what was hidden here, even though a small voice in my head was begging me to turn around. Against Nina's protests, we walked towards the funhouse. The building loomed in front of us, its walls crooked, like the house itself was, bent and warped from age. A sign hung above the entrance read, "The House of Mirrors." The words were painted in faded red, as though the paint had bled over the years. Much like the history of this place, "I think we should just stay out here," Nina insisted, but Ella, curious as ever, pushed the door open. It creaked loudly as though it hadn't been used in decades. The stale air hit us immediately, heavy with the scent of dust and rot. Inside, the funhouse mirrors twisted and distorted our reflections. At first we laughed, seeing our own faces contort into exaggerated versions of ourselves. But then, something changed. The laughter stopped. In the mirrors, the faces we saw weren't always ours. For a split second, I saw something behind me. Something dark, moving in the reflection. But when I turned, nothing was there. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the feeling that someone or something was watching us. I wasn't the only one who felt it. Adam suddenly froze, his face pale. "Did you see that?" Mark and Ella looked at him. "See what?" Adam didn't answer. Instead, he walked towards the far corner where a mirror was cracked. His face stared back at him, but it wasn't just his reflection. The face in the glass smiled back at him, not the grin that he was wearing, but a twisted, mocking version of it. "Something's not right," Adam muttered, stepping away from the mirror. But as soon as he did, the reflection in the glass didn't move with him. It stayed there, grinning. I looked at Nina. Her face had turned white, her lips barely moving as she whispered, "We need to leave now." But before we could make a move, a soft child's laugh echoed through the house. It was faint at first, then grew louder, clearer, until it felt as though the sound was coming from all around us. It didn't sound like a happy laugh. It was cold, empty. I turned to look at the others, but none of us moved. We were frozen. And then I saw a dot in one of the mirrors. A small figure stood at the far end of the room, its face obscured by a hood, its small hands clutching something in the dark. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, just stared straight ahead. But I could feel it watching us, waiting. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the figure was gone. What the hell was that? Mark whispered, his voice trembling. "I don't know," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. "But we need to leave now." We turned to head back, but as we walked toward the door, the air around us grew thicker. The laughing had stopped, but the weight of it lingered in the walls, hanging like a fog. The exit seemed further away than before. I started to feel the same sense of claustrophobia I'd felt earlier, like the carnival itself was closing in on us. I reached for the door handle, but before I could open it, the music started again. But this time, it was different. The tune wasn't the same playful melody we'd heard when we first arrived. It was warped, twisted, like it was pulling us deeper into the carnival's grip. A shadow passed by the window outside. I couldn't make out what it was, but I knew it wasn't one of us. Something was out there. Something was watching. I turned to the others. We need to get out of here, now. We rushed towards the exit, our footsteps echoing through the now silent house of mirrors. The door, which had been wide open just moments ago, was suddenly shut tight. I grabbed the handle, but it didn't budge. Panic surged through me. I could feel the air getting thicker, like it was closing in on us. My breath became shallow, and I tried to calm myself, but the feeling of being trapped started to set in. What's happening? Ella whispered, her voice shaky. She had her hand on the door too, but it was like the door itself had become a part of the wall, solid and unmovable. I don't know, I said, my heart racing. We have to find another way out. Mark started banging on the door, shouting, "Someone help us, let us out," but the walls didn't answer. The only response was the creaking of the floorboards behind us. I turned slowly, my stomach sinking. The mirrors had begun to shift again. At first, I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, but then I saw it clearly. The mirrors weren't reflecting us anymore. Instead, they were showing people figures standing in the distance, far off in the carnival, watching us. Their faces were obscured, but I could feel their eyes on us waiting. It was like they knew something we didn't. I backed away from the mirrors, my mind racing. Guys, do you see that? Nina, looking pale and shaken, nodded slowly. This isn't real. This can't be happening. I tried the door again, but it still wouldn't open. I glanced back at the mirrors, my breath catching in my throat. The figures were moving. They were getting closer. This isn't a normal carnival, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Something happened here. Something terrible. That's when I heard it. A soft scratching sound coming from the floorboards. It was slow, deliberate, like something or someone was moving just underneath us. Do you hear that? Mark said, his voice trembling. His eyes were wide, his usual jokes and bravado replaced by fear. I nodded, trying to ignore the rising panic in my chest. We need to get out of here now. As if on cue, the mirrors began to crack, spiderwebs of jagged lines appearing across their surfaces. The figures in the mirrors moved faster now, their outlines blurring and shifting as though they were no longer confined by the glass dot in the reflection. One of the figures stepped forward. It was a child, no older than 5 or 6, dressed in old-fashioned carnival clothes, faded, ragged, with dirt streaked across its face. The child stared at us, but there was no innocence in its eyes, no warmth, no kindness. Just a hollow stare. Cold and dead, I froze. The reflection didn't match reality. The child in the mirror smiled, a smile that stretched too wide, the skin pulling taut around its face. Its eyes didn't blink. It was wrong. Get away from the mirrors. Nina screamed, grabbing my arm. She yanked me backward, pulling us away from the cracked glass, but the child's grin was already burned into my mind. We turned to the door again. Still nothing. The walls seemed to hum with an unsettling energy, vibrating in time with the flickering carnival music outside. I could feel my mind unraveling, the edges of my thoughts becoming tangled and frayed. It was like the very walls were trying to push us into the mirrors, into the reflection, trapping us in this warped, distorted place forever. Then, a new sound of faint giggle, barely audible over the music. It was soft, high-pitched, and somehow familiar. A child's laugh. The same laugh we'd heard before. I spun around, my heart in my throat, but I couldn't find the source of the sound. The mirrors had gone completely black, like they were covered in shadows, hiding something behind them. That's it. Adam shouted, his voice cracking. We need to find another exit. There has to be one. But before we could move, the walls around us began to shift. The whole funhouse seemed to groan, like it was alive. The floor beneath our feet trembled. And then the lights went out. Complete darkness. Panic exploded inside me. I could hear the others breathing heavily, their footsteps shuffling around me. I could feel them, but I couldn't see them. Everything was pitch black. Then the music started again. But this time, it wasn't distorted. It was too clear, like it was playing right in our ears. The sound of the carousel music. The same tune we'd heard earlier, but now it sounded almost welcoming. The lights flickered back on, but they were dim, casting strange long shadows across the walls. I glanced around. The mirrors had changed. The figures inside them weren't just reflections anymore. They were real. The child from earlier was standing in front of me, its grin still stretched across its face. But this time, its eyes were different. They weren't cold anymore. They were alive, following me, watching me. I took a step back, and the child stepped forward. The air seemed to freeze around us, thick with the sensation that we weren't alone anymore. That child, its eyes now glowing faintly in the dim light, stared straight at me, and my heart skipped a beat. Its mouth opened, wide, impossibly wide, as if it were about to say something, but the words didn't come out. Instead, the darkness behind it seemed to swallow up the room. Then out of nowhere, the walls around us shuddered. The ground beneath us vibrated as though something heavy had shifted in the distance. We all froze, looking around frantically, trying to make sense of the sounds, but they only grew louder, closer. The carnival music, once warped and eerie, had changed once again. Now it was louder, faster, frantic, as if it were racing towards something. The ride was beginning to spin out of control. What the hell is happening? Adam gasped, his voice trembling as he backed away from the child, only to find himself staring at the mirrors that now reflected his own frightened face. But the reflection wasn't him. I couldn't breathe. In the mirror, Adam's reflection smiled back at him. But the smile wasn't his. It was twisted, cruel, and far too wide. The reflection's eyes were black, holes where there should have been life. No, Mark muttered. This isn't real. This can't be real. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Again. It felt like the entire carnival, the entire world around us, was pulling on the threads of reality, unraveling everything we thought we knew. The walls stretched, creaked, and then the floor beneath our feet cracked open. A hole appeared, dark and deep, as if the ground itself had split to reveal something hidden beneath. I felt an overwhelming urge to run, to escape, but the child's eyes, those glowing, empty eyes, kept me rooted to the spot. "Move!" Nina screamed, grabbing my arm and pulling me away from the mirrors. But no matter how fast we moved, the walls seemed to bend, stretch, and fold, changing direction at will. It was as if the funhouse itself had become a maze, its very structure twisting and shifting like it was alive, feeding on our fear. The giggling started again, this time louder, more insistent. It echoed off the walls, bouncing between the mirrors, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. I could feel the eyes of the carnival on us, watching, waiting for us to slip. The mirrors, though shattered in places, reflected a distorted version of our group. As we moved, the reflections moved too, but they were wrong. They were too slow, too delayed, like they were mocking us or perhaps predicting our every move. We reached the edge of the funhouse, the door we had tried to open now behind us, but it was no longer a door. It was a solid wall, completely smooth, as if it had never been a door at all. I slammed my fists against it, desperate, my breath ragged. "God, let us out!" I shouted, my voice breaking. But then, something unexpected happened. The wall in front of us began to shift. Slowly at first, but then faster, as if something inside it was pushing against it, trying to force its way out. I stepped back, heart pounding in my chest, as a dark, swirling shape began to materialize from within the wall. It was a figure, tall, its form twisting like smoke. The darkness wrapped around it, swirling and pulsing with an unnatural rhythm. A moment, I thought it was the child, but no, it was much, much bigger. A shape that shouldn't exist in the real world. The air around it was colder, suffocating. And then, just as quickly, it lunged forward, its form blurring as it passed through the wall. The figure, whatever it was now right in front of us. It was tall, too tall for a person, with long twisted limbs that ended in sharp, jagged claws. Its face, if you could call it that, was a distorted mask of shadows, with two glowing eyes that burned like coals in the night. The thing tilted its head, and I could hear its breathing low, slow, as if it was savoring the fear in the air. And then it spoke. "You shouldn't have come here." The voice was deep, guttural, and it didn't come from its mouth, but from the very walls around us. It wasn't speaking to us in any way we understood. It was speaking to the very heart of the carnival. The whole place seemed to tremble, as if the figure's words had shaken it. Awake. Mark stumbled back, but the creature didn't move. It stood still, towering over us, its eyes narrowing. "You're mine now," it whispered, and the words felt like cold hands wrapping around my throat. Everything inside me screamed to run, but my feet were glued to the floor. The giggling picked up again, louder, more frantic, and suddenly the mirrors began to crack even more. We were surrounded. No way out. No escape. The figure raised one of its long, twisted limbs and pointed directly at me. The room went still. "Your souls are forfeit." For a split second, everything went silent. The world seemed to freeze, suspended in time. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could hear was the deafening thud of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The figure's glowing eyes never left mine, and I felt a cold, suffocating weight pressing against my chest, as if the air itself had turned to stone. You're not real," Nina whispered, her voice barely audible, trembling with fear. Her eyes were wide, staring at the creature in front of us, but she wasn't looking at it. She was looking past it, as though trying to find a way to escape without making any sudden movements. But I knew this thing, this shadow, was as real as anything could be. It wasn't just part of the carnival. It was the carnival. It was the reason the walls moved, the reason the lights flickered, the reason the mirrors were cracked. "You're wrong," the creature's voice rumbled, growing louder, more powerful with each word. The walls vibrated under its command. "You think you can leave? This place will never let you go." I wanted to scream, to yell, to run, but my body refused to move. I was paralyzed, my legs locked in place, my mind spiraling with dread. That laugh, the one that echoed in the background, so innocent at first, was now like the sound of 1,000 whispers, all surrounding us, closing in from every angle. It was coming from everywhere, from the mirrors, from the walls, from the shadows themselves. I turned my head, trying to break free from the figure's gaze, but as I did, I saw something even worse. Behind the creature, the carnival had transformed. The once silent rides had come alive. The Ferris wheel began to turn slowly, its lights flickering in time with the eerie music, and the carousel horses that had been motionless before now twitched, their heads jerking unnaturally. But what terrified me most were the figures I saw on them. People, no, not people, but shadows, all distorted and twisted. Their faces were obscured by darkness, but I could see their eyes, their hollow, empty eyes. They were staring at us, their bodies moving in a way that shouldn't have been possible, their limbs bent at unnatural angles. I couldn't look away. I felt something deep inside me, something ancient stir, a feeling I couldn't quite name. But it wasn't the feeling of fear anymore. No, it was something worse. The figure before us moved closer, and for the first time, it smiled. But this wasn't a normal smile. This wasn't a smile that could belong to anything alive. Its face stretched unnaturally wide, its lips splitting open to reveal rows of sharpened teeth, like a predator about to feast on its prey. The shadows around, US pulsed, and the carnival music grew faster, louder. The laughter, that hollow, guttural sound, filled the air, growing louder still. It was no longer a child's laugh. Now it was a chorus of voices, all screaming, laughing, begging, "You will join them." The creature's voice boomed, shaking the very air around us. "This is the Carnival of Souls. You will never leave." I could feel it. Feel the pull of the carnival. The darkness pressing against my mind, trying to take control. But deep down, a small part of me refused to give in. I had to fight it. I had to crash. The ground beneath us split open again, wider this time, the crack splitting through the very center of the carnival. Something huge was emerging from the depths. Something far more terrifying than anything we had seen so far. I turned to run. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away from that thing. But as I tried to move, the shadows reached out, grabbing my arms, pulling me back, and for a moment, I felt like I was being dragged into the very darkness I had been so afraid of. "No!" I screamed, but my voice was drowned out by the laughter. The grotesque, bone-chilling laughter that echoed through the carnival, as if it were alive. Suddenly, I felt a strong hand grab mine. It was Nina. "We can't let it take us," she gasped, her face pale, but her eyes were determined. "We have to fight," I nodded, but my thoughts were scattered. We couldn't fight this. We were surrounded, trapped in a carnival that wasn't just a place. It was a living nightmare. We had to try. I looked around. There had to be something we could use. Something that could break the grip of the creature. The carnival had to have a weakness. Something hidden deep in its twisted heart. And then I saw it. At the far end of the carnival, beyond the Ferris wheel, the old ticket booth was glowing faintly in the shadows. It was ancient, covered in grime and dirt, but there was something about it. A feeling that it had been here longer than the rest of the carnival. Something in the back of my mind screamed that it held the answer. It had to. "We're going to that ticket booth," I said, my voice shaking but steady. "That's our only chance." We didn't have much time. We ran towards it, the shadows snapping at our heels, the laughter growing louder, more intense. But we had to make it. We had to find a way out of this nightmare before it consumed us completely. The distance between us and the ticket booth felt like miles, even though it was only a few hundred feet away. Each step seemed to drag me further into the nightmare, and the carnival's atmosphere grew thicker, like I was walking through an invisible fog, each breath heavier than the last. The shadows were moving now, swirling around us like thick smoke, their shapes shifting and bending in unnatural ways. Every time I glanced back, I saw them, just out of the corner of my eye. Figures, crouching, waiting. The laughter, the damned laughter, kept echoing in my ears, a constant reminder that we were not alone. It was as if the very carnival itself was laughing at us, mocking us for thinking we could escape. I could hear it getting closer, the sound of footsteps that weren't ours, echoing from behind. But when I turned around, nothing was there, just the dark, empty carnival. But we couldn't stop, not now. Not after everything we'd seen. "We're almost there," Nina said, her voice urgent, but filled with an edge of panic. She was clutching my arm so tightly, I could feel her nails digging into my skin, but I didn't dare pull away. Not with the darkness creeping up behind us. As we neared the booth, I could see that it wasn't like the others in the carnival. It wasn't run down or overgrown with weeds. It was ancient, yes, but it was pristine in its decay. The wood was dark, the windows dusty, but the lights flickering weakly still seemed to cast a pale, inviting glow. It looked so out of place, like it didn't belong to this twisted carnival. Almost like it was untouched by the nightmare around it. But that didn't mean it was safe. I reached for the door, my hand shaking, and pushed it open. The moment I did, the air inside the booth hit me like a cold wave. It was the kind of cold that sank deep into your bones, a freezing chill that made me feel like I was back in the middle of winter, despite the heat of the night. The booth itself was small, claustrophobic, even, but it was empty, save for an old counter and a few dusty, old Carnival tickets scattered across the floor. Nina stepped inside, her breath coming in quick gasps. "What now?" she asked, her eyes darting around the room, searching for some kind of answer. I didn't know, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this place, this booth, held the key. The Carnival had drawn us in, and it had taken so many others before us, but there was something off about the booth. It felt like it had been waiting for us. I walked up to the counter, my fingers brushing against the cracked wood. The moment my skin made contact, the lights flickered again, and I heard a faint clicking sound, like an old mechanism starting to move. The floor beneath us trembled, and I heard something, a voice, so faint it was almost drowned by the Carnival music, calling out from somewhere deep within the walls. "You think you've found salvation?" it whispered. The voice was so faint, so distant, I wasn't sure if it was real, but I heard it again. "You think the ticket booth will save you?" The lights in the booth flickered once more, and then, just as quickly, the door slammed shut behind us, locking us inside. The air grew colder still, and a dark shadow swept over the room, blocking out all the light. We were no longer in the booth. It was as if the entire world around us had vanished, leaving only the shadow. "No, no," Nina screamed, her voice high-pitched in panic as she tried to open the door, but it was stuck. Stuck as if something invisible was holding it in place. I stepped back, my eyes wide. The walls of the booth were starting to disintegrate, pieces of the wood crumbling to dust. The shadow was growing, enveloping the room, crawling up the walls, creeping over us like it was trying to consume us whole. In the center of the room, something glowed. It was faint, but unmistakable. A single red ticket, small, old, and worn, lay on the counter. Its edges were frayed, as if it had been sitting there for years, waiting. It was the only thing that hadn't decayed or fallen apart. I didn't even have to think. I knew what I had to do. "The ticket, Nina." "Grab the ticket." She hesitated, looking at me like I was crazy. But then, with no choice left, she reached out and snatched the ticket. The instant she touched it, the world around us shifted. The walls collapsed. The ground beneath us cracked open, and the shadow dissolved, leaving only the light from the ticket, glowing in a cold, unnatural red. The room shifted and warped, like we were being pulled through a void, and I could feel myself being torn away from everything I had known. And then everything stopped. We were no longer in the Carnival, but we weren't anywhere else either. It was just nothing. A void, so deep and black that it felt like I could fall forever. I reached for Nina's hand, but when I looked at her, her face had changed. It was no longer Nina. It was that child. The same child we had seen in the mirrors, its smile wide and twisted. "You thought you could escape, didn't you?" the child whispered, its voice now eerily deep. It leaned closer to me, and its eyes were so black, so hollow. They seemed to swallow the light around us. The world began to close in. Again, the Carnival music played softly in the distance, as if it was never far away to begin with. I gasped for air, but there was none. The child's twisted smile grew wider, and my mind screamed, but my mouth couldn't form a sound. The void around us seemed to pulse, the walls bending and shifting like something alive. The Carnival was no longer just a place. It had become a realm, a living nightmare, a dimension where time didn't exist, where the boundaries between life and death blurred. The child's eyes glowed brighter, and then, just like that, the smile disappeared. In its place was something far worse, a voice. Not the child's, but something older, something that sounded like it had been waiting for this moment for ages. The voice echoed from all directions, deep and resonant, vibrating the very air around us. "You should not have come." The words were not spoken to me directly, but I could feel their weight on my chest, pressing down on me like 1,000 stones. I turned to Nina, but she was no longer there. "Nina?" The world around me shifted again, spinning wildly. I reached out, trying to steady myself, but the air was thick, almost solid, and the ground beneath me was no longer stable. It felt as if I was floating, being pulled toward a distant point, something I couldn't see but could feel. A presence, ancient and powerful, drawing me in. I took a step forward, and the ground beneath me cracked open, revealing a glowing red abyss. The darkness reached up like hands, grabbing at my ankles, pulling me in. I tried to fight it, but the more I struggled, the harder the pull became. I could hear whispers now, voices speaking in a language I didn't understand, urging me to fall, to let go. But then, just as I thought I would be consumed, the pull stopped. The whispers ceased. I was standing on solid ground again. The void was gone, replaced by a new sight, the carnival, but different. Twisted, distorted, like it had been drained of its color and life, leaving only a hollow shell behind. The rides were rusted, the lights dim, and the air felt cold, empty. But there was something else, something worse. The shadows. They were everywhere now, creeping along the ground, slithering up the walls, their twisted forms flickering in and out of view. They were no longer just figments of our imagination. They were alive, watching. I tried to move, but the shadows blocked my path. They crawled over the ground like liquid darkness, their forms twisting into horrific shapes, faces. Hands, limbs clawing at me, reaching for my skin. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, as the very air seemed to thicken, making each step feel like I was wading through molasses. Then, I heard it again. That laugh, the laughter so high-pitched and childlike at first, now sounded distorted, as if it was being played backward, stretched out, twisted into something far more sinister. It echoed from all corners of the carnival, from behind the broken mirrors, from the carousel that had started spinning on its own, its horses moving jerkily, as though they were being pulled by invisible strings. The laughter grew louder, and I could see the figure again, the one from earlier, the one with the glowing eyes and jagged limbs. It was standing in the center of the carnival, its eyes fixed on me, watching my every move. But this time, something was different. The creature wasn't just an observer anymore. It was actively hunting. "You can't run from me," the creature's voice rumbled, low and menacing. It took a step forward, and the ground trembled under its weight. The carnival seemed to come alive around it, the rides groaning, the mirrors cracking even more. The creature's eyes, those black, empty holes, focused on me with terrifying precision. "You are already mine." I stumbled back, panic flooding my chest, my breath shallow, my mind raced. There had to be something, anything, that could stop this. I had to think, had to find a way out. But the carnival, this place, was no longer just a place. It was alive, feeding on us, twisting our fears and desires into its very fabric. Suddenly, I saw it at the far edge of the carnival. Beyond the Ferris wheel, the ticket booth was glowing once more. But this time, the booth wasn't empty. Inside, a figure stood, watching us. It was Nina, or what was left of her. Her eyes were wide, filled with terror, but there was something else, something strange. In the way she moved, too fluid, too unnatural. She raised a hand to the glass, pressing her palm against it, as though trying to reach through to us. But the moment she did, the glass cracked, spreading out like a spider's web. And then, her voice. A scream, not from fear, but from something else. Something darker. "It's too late," she whispered, her voice distant, as if coming from far away. "You'll never escape. You're part of it now." The shadows around me surged forward, crawling up my legs, wrapping around my waist, pulling me down. I fought to free myself, but it was no use. The carnival had won. It had claimed me. And I could feel it. The pull, the desire, the dark hunger. I had become a part of it. I felt the shadows tightening around me, dragging me down into the dark. My breath came in sharp, panicked gasps, but the air was thick, suffocating, as though the carnival itself was swallowing me whole. I reached out in desperation, but the darkness closed in on me, wrapping around my arms, my chest, suffocating the very life from me. I was no longer standing, I was sinking, falling into something far worse than I had ever imagined. But just before the darkness could claim me entirely, a sharp voice broke through the chaos. "Stop!" The shadows paused, their grip loosening ever so slightly. My eyes darted to the source of the voice, but the world around me was still spinning, the edges of my vision blurring. Through the haze, I saw her Nina, but this wasn't the Nina I had known. Her eyes were wide, blank, hollowed-out orbs. She looked like she had been swallowed by the carnival, consumed by it, but her presence felt wrong. There was something off about the way she moved, like she wasn't quite human anymore. Her lips parted, and she spoke again, her voice a harsh whisper that scraped against my ears. "You should have listened. This place, it's not just a carnival. It's a trap." A trap? My mind raced. I had always known something was off, but I never thought it was a trap that had claimed Nina, and would soon claim me too. You can't fight it. She stepped closer, the shadows parting for her like some twisted throne. "You think you can escape, but this place is already won." I shook my head, desperate. No, there has to be a way out. The words sounded weak, even to my own ears. But I refused to believe that all of this, the pain, the suffering, the endless horror, was for nothing. There had to be a way out. Nina's lips curled into a sad, almost pitying smile. But there was something dark in her expression, something evil. It was as if she were watching me, waiting to see if I would break. And just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I saw it. The ticket, the one we had touched earlier. It was still in her hand, glowing faintly, its edges curling as if it were alive. "You still don't get it, do you?" Her voice was softer now, almost a whisper. "That ticket, it's a lie. It's the key, but not the way you think. The carnival doesn't let go of anyone. It takes, it feeds. And now you're a part of it, asterisk asterisk." A wave of dread swept over me. I didn't want to believe her, but everything she said was making sense. The carnival wasn't just alive. It was a predator, and we were nothing but prey. You're lying." My voice broke as I tried to stand up, to fight against the overwhelming pull of the shadows. But I couldn't move. The darkness had me, pulling me back down into the earth. Nina's expression darkened, and she stepped closer, the shadows swirling around her like a cloak. "It's too late. We're all part of it now." Her voice turned sharp, almost hollow. "You'll never leave this place. We are the carnival now." The laughter echoed again, louder, more insistent. The sound felt like it was coming from everywhere, swirling around me until it was the only thing I could hear. It was insane, the laughter of countless souls, twisted and broken. And then I realized, the laughter was us. It was the souls that had been claimed by the carnival, all those lost over the years. All of them, trapped here, screaming in agony, just as we were now. The carnival was a prison. I felt the weight of her words crashing down on me. This place, this nightmare, wasn't just something we had wandered into. It had been waiting for us. And now it was feeding on us. On me. I could hear the whispers. Again, soft and cold, curling around my thoughts like a noose. "It's not real," I whispered to myself, trying to convince myself that I wasn't trapped here forever. This can't be real. But deep down I knew it was real. This was real. Suddenly, Nina's hand shot out, grabbing my arm with unnerving force. I tried to pull away, but her grip was iron tight. "The carnival chooses," she hissed. "It always chooses. And now you've been chosen." Her hand tightened, and I felt my body go numb, the shadows crawling over me, seeping into my skin. I couldn't fight anymore. The pull was too strong. The darkness had me in its grip, and I could feel myself fading, slowly, disappearing. But then, from the corner of my eye, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The Ferris wheel, the one that had been abandoned, rusted and still was turning. Slowly, it was alive again, and at the top of the wheel, silhouetted against the sickly yellow light, was a figure. Not the creature with glowing eyes, but something else. Something that felt older, more ancient. A figure cloaked in shadow, its face hidden beneath a hood, its presence overpowering, like it had always been here, watching. I tried to scream, but the words wouldn't come. My vision darkened, and the last thing I saw before everything went black was the figure on the Ferris wheel, reaching down toward me. And then silence. When I opened my eyes again, everything was still. The carnival, what was left of it, lay in front of me, desolate and decaying. The Ferris wheel, now motionless, loomed like a giant skeleton in the distance. But it wasn't the rusted, broken structure I had seen before. No, now it was perfect. Gleaming, pristine, as though time had rewound and the carnival was at its peak. Vibrant and alive. I stood, my legs weak, my mind foggy, trying to make sense of what had happened. The shadows that had swallowed me whole were gone, but the air still felt heavy, thick with an unnatural chill. The ground beneath me seemed to vibrate, as if the entire carnival was a living, breathing thing, waiting. I looked around, feeling something shift in the air. The carnival was no longer just a place. It was a trap, one that had consumed not just me, but all of us. And there was no escape. Not for anyone, but as I tried to push that thought away, I realized something. Nina was gone. I staggered forward, panic rising in my chest. Nina. My voice cracked as I called out for her, but the sound of my words seemed to vanish before they even reached the air. The carnival around me was too quiet, too still. The laughter, the music, the sound of children's screams, everything was gone. "Where are you?" I muttered under my breath, but there was no answer. Only the eerie silence pressing down on me. I turned around, my eyes scanning the empty paths, the dark corners of the carnival. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something, a shadow moving. Just a flicker at first, but enough to send a shiver down my spine. It was fleeting. Just a trick of the light, but I knew what I had seen. It was her, Nina. I called out, but my voice barely reached the distance. I moved closer, trying to steady my shaking hands, the sense of dread creeping in like a slow poison. As I passed under the old carnival sign, the letters glowing faintly in the dim light, I felt the ground shift beneath me again, a deep, resonating thrum that echoed in my chest. And then I saw it. The ticket booth, now standing in the center of the carnival like a beacon, glowing with a sickly red light. It was still there, untouched. The one place that seemed to stand against the decay and death surrounding us. I walked toward it, my legs heavy, the weight of the carnival pulling at me with every step. But as I got closer, something didn't feel right. The air felt thicker, colder. The smell of stale popcorn and burnt sugar filled my nose, making me want to gag. It was like being trapped inside a memory, something I couldn't escape from. Door of the ticket booth creaked open, and there she was. Nina. But it wasn't Nina anymore. She was standing inside the booth, her back turned toward me, her hands pressed against the glass. Her figure was hazy, as if she were fading in and out of existence, her face pale and twisted in a grotesque expression. "Nina!" I shouted, stepping forward, but the moment I did, the shadows returned, slithering across the ground, blocking my path. They hissed and writhed like serpents, dark tendrils stretching out toward me, pulling me back. "Let me go!" I screamed, my voice raw with terror, but the shadows only tightened, dragging me back into the void. And then I saw it. The reflection in the glass. My own face, distorted and pale, staring back at me with wide, hollow eyes. But there was something wrong. My face. Wasn't mine. It was fading. My features were slowly disintegrating, crumbling away like ash in the wind. I screamed, but no sound came out. You're part of it now. Nina's voice echoed from inside the booth, cold and emotionless. Just like me, just like everyone else. The carnival's laugh returned, louder this time, shaking the very ground beneath me. It was everywhere now, filling the air, creeping into my thoughts, my soul. I could feel the carnival, its hunger, its need for more. And it was coming for me. For us. The world around me began to twist, the edges blurring and contorting, like I was being pulled through a tunnel, the walls closing in. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't escape. The shadows were everywhere, devouring me piece by piece, until there was nothing left but darkness. You can't escape. You never will. And then, as if the very fabric of reality had been torn apart, everything stopped. I woke up. I was back at the carnival entrance, standing in the middle of the road, the bright lights flashing around me, the sounds of children's laughter and carnival music ringing in my ears. It was as if nothing had ever happened, but I knew it had. I had been here before. I could feel it, the presence, the hunger. I looked down at my hand and there it was. The red ticket. My heart pounded in my chest as I clutched the ticket, my fingers trembling uncontrollably. I didn't understand what was happening. How was I back here? Back at the carnival, standing at the entrance as if nothing had changed, as if the horrors I had just experienced had been nothing more than a bad dream. But I knew better. The air felt different this time. Heavy, thick with a suffocating weight. The sounds of laughter, the clinking of coins, and the distant call of carnival barkers felt like they were seeping into my skin, each sound vibrating in my bones. The carousel was spinning, but the horses' eyes weren't painted with playful joy anymore. They were empty, hollow, staring out at nothing. I turned around, scanning the carnival, and I saw it again, the ticket booth. Still glowing, still standing like a beacon in the night, waiting for me to approach. But I couldn't. My legs refused to move. Every part of me wanted to run, to leave, but I knew there was no point. This place, this nightmare, wasn't something you could escape. Not once it had claimed you. And it had claimed me. I raised my hand to my face, but the reflection was no longer mine. The more I stared at my hand, the more I realized something had changed. My skin was paler, more translucent, like I was fading, dissolving into the carnival. And the worst part? I didn't feel scared anymore. Not in the same way I had before. It was like I had become part of it, like I had been swallowed by the very darkness I had been running from. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The carnival's laughter grew louder, ringing in my ears, shaking my bones. It wasn't just one voice anymore. It was all of them, the lost souls, the ones who had come before me, the ones who were now trapped here, just like me. The shadows were no longer crawling along the ground. They were alive, twisting and writhing through the air, taking shape and form as they reached for me. But they weren't reaching to harm me. They were welcoming me, inviting me into their fold. Nina? I whispered, my voice a mere breath, as I took a step toward the ticket booth. But she didn't answer. I had to know what happened to her. I had to know if she had become like the others, if she was trapped here, lost forever. The carnival's laughter was getting louder, more insistent, and I felt the pull again. The same pull I had felt when I first walked into this place. It was like gravity, forceful, inescapable. My body moved of its own accord, dragging me forward, forcing me closer to the booth. I was almost there when the shadows stretched out, blocking my path, forming a wall between me and the booth. It was like they were trying to protect it, or keep me away. I hesitated, heart racing, eyes darting from side to side. But then, I heard it, a whisper. It's too late for you. The voice was cold, distant, but somehow familiar. I looked around, but no one was there. Not even Nina. But then I saw it, the reflection in the ticket booth's glass. This time it wasn't just me. It was Nina standing next to me. Her eyes were wide, but empty, hollow, like she had been sucked dry of everything that made her human. She raised her hand to the glass, but the reflection was already fading, disappearing into the darkness. You're a part of it now. Her voice echoed, distorted, as if coming from another time, another place. You can't leave. I backed away from the booth, my heart pounding louder than the carnival's laughter. But the shadows followed me, closing in like a wave. They didn't need to move. The carnival itself was alive, and its presence was suffocating. Leave me alone. I cried, but my voice was swallowed up by the relentless laughter that continued to surround me. I turned back to the entrance, but it wasn't the same entrance I had seen earlier. The lights had dimmed, the air had grown colder. The path had twisted like a dark maze. The carnival no longer felt like a place of fun. It was a prison, and I was locked inside. You can never leave, the voice whispered again. Not now, not ever. I felt the ticket in my hand, warm and pulsating, like it was alive. I gripped it tighter, unsure if I was holding it or if it was holding me down. Suddenly, the ground beneath me gave way, and I fell. The darkness swallowed me whole. The carnival's laugh echoed around me, louder and more distorted, and I could feel the very air around me shift, like I was falling through time itself, into another world, another dimension, where the carnival was always watching, always waiting, its hunger never satisfied, and I knew then that I would never leave. That this place was more than just a carnival. It was a trap, an eternal nightmare, and I was its newest victim. I fell deeper, the shadows reaching out for me, and then everything went silent. When I woke up, I wasn't sure if I had really woken up at all. The air around me was still heavy, thick with an unnatural stillness. I tried to move, but my body felt sluggish, as if I were stuck in quicksand. The shadows had retreated for the moment, but the presence of the carnival still lingered, like a dark cloud hanging over me. I was lying on the ground, cold, damp concrete, pressing against my skin. My chest was tight, my breath shallow. For a moment, I just lay there, trying to gather my thoughts. Was it all a dream? I wondered, had I imagined it all? But then, I saw it. The ticket was still in my hand, but it had changed. The edges were blackened, as if burned by something unseen. It pulsed with a strange energy, flickering like the heartbeat of something dark and ancient. I stared at it for a long moment, almost mesmerized, and then I heard it, the sound of footsteps. Soft at first, but then growing louder, closer. My heart skipped a beat. The footsteps weren't alone. They were accompanied by a low humming, a tune that seemed to echo from the very ground beneath me. I tried to stand up, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. It was as though I was frozen, paralyzed by the sound, by the presence that was creeping. Closer. My eyes darted around the space, but the surroundings were unfamiliar, different from any part of the carnival I had seen before. And then I saw it, the carousel. It was in front of me, but it wasn't just any carousel. This one was massive, its horses looming like twisted giants in the dim light. They were no longer made of wood or metal. They were alive, their eyes glowing bright red, fixed on me with unblinking malice. The carousel spun, but there was no music, no laughter, just the ominous sound of the horses' hooves hitting the ground, echoing through the silence. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, my body betraying me, unable to escape the growing humming that surrounded me. It was like a siren call, pulling me in, drawing me closer to the cursed ride. The air grew colder, the shadows thickening once again, closing in around me. I could feel the weight of them, pressing down on me, suffocating me. The carousel's horses seemed to stretch and twist, their forms becoming more monstrous, more grotesque with every rotation. The closer they got, the more I could see the grotesque smiles on their faces wide, jagged smiles filled with rows of sharp, gleaming teeth. I tried to scream, but the words didn't leave my mouth. They were swallowed up by the overwhelming hum of the carousel. I could feel it pulling at my chest, like something was inside of me, clawing its way out, wanting to join the twisted ride. And then a figure appeared. A man he was standing beside the carousel, watching me with an expression that sent chills down my spine. He was tall, his features hidden by the shadow of his hood, but his presence was heavy, suffocating. He didn't move, didn't speak, but I could feel his eyes on me, like he was waiting for something, waiting for me to do something. I reached for the ticket, but as my fingers brushed against its surface, a jolt of pain shot through my body, like I had been struck by lightning. The ticket burned into my skin, searing its mark into me. I screamed in agony, the sound finally breaking free from my throat, but it was lost in the noise of the carnival, the laughter, the whispers, the hum of the carousel. And then the man spoke. "It's your turn." His voice was like ice, cold and sharp, and I felt every word echo in my bones. My turn? What did he mean? Before I could even react, he stepped forward, his hand reaching toward me. The shadows seemed to part for him, moving aside like they were his servants. He grabbed my wrist, and his touch was like ice, sending a shockwave of cold through my body. "You can't leave," he whispered, his breath hot against my ear. "The carnival is yours now. It has chosen you." I tried to pull away, but it was no use. His grip was like iron, unbreakable. The carnival had claimed me. I was trapped. His hand tightened around my wrist, and I felt myself being dragged toward the carousel. It was no longer spinning slowly, it was accelerating. The horses' hooves pounding faster, the hum growing louder, drowning out everything else. "Let me go." I screamed, but my voice was nothing more than a whisper in the cacophony of noise. The carnival had swallowed my voice, my strength. It had swallowed me. The man didn't answer. He didn't need to. The carousel was already waiting for me, and I knew, deep down, that there was no escape. This place, this cursed carnival, would never let me go. The carousel stopped, and I was next. The moment the carousel halted, everything went still. The hum faded into an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the metal supports, like the carnival itself was breathing. My chest tightened as I stood frozen, unable to look away from the horses, their eyes still glowing with that unnatural red light. I could feel the pressure in the air, thick and suffocating, as if the carnival was closing in around me, its darkness pulling me deeper. The shadows that had once lurked at the edges of my vision were now alive, crawling up the walls, reaching out toward me with their jagged black fingers. But no matter how far I tried to step back, I was always pulled forward, drawn into the center of the cursed ride. The man, the one who had dragged me here, was still standing beside me. His hand hadn't let go of my wrist. It was like he was anchoring me to the spot, keeping me from moving, from escaping. He said nothing, his cold gaze fixed on the carousel, as though waiting for something to happen. I could feel the intensity of the moment, a weight pressing on my chest, on my soul. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't obey. Fear had settled deep into my bones, immobilizing me, making me feel as if I were part of this place, like the carnival had claimed me, just as it had claimed so many others before. Suddenly, the carousel lights flickered, casting eerie, distorted shadows across the ground. The horses began to stir again, their eyes widening in grotesque delight, as if they had been waiting for me, feeding off the fear that had begun to spread through. The man moved then, pulling me toward one of the horses, his grip unrelenting. He didn't look at me, didn't even acknowledge my presence. It was as if I were just another piece of the carnival, another soul trapped in its grasp. "No!" I gasped, trying to break free, but the shadows closed in, tightening their hold. The carnival wasn't just a place, it was alive. It had a mind of its own, and it was hunting me. It's your time. The man finally spoke, his voice low, almost a growl. You belong to it now. Before I could comprehend his words, the carousel horse loomed before me. Its eyes were now entirely black, empty voids that sucked in the light around them. Its mouth stretched into a twisted grin, jagged teeth exposed. It wasn't an innocent ride anymore. It was a creature. A monster. Without warning, the man shoved me onto the horse, his strength too much for me to fight against. As I fell into the seat, I could feel the weight of the carnival pressing down harder than ever. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The carousel began to spin again. Slowly at first, but then it picked up speed, faster and faster until it was a blur of lights and shadows. The laughter of the unseen crowd swirling in the background like a distant memory. My body jerked against the restraints of the horse. But there was no escape. The carnival was taking me somewhere dark, somewhere deep. The laughter from before wasn't just a sound. It was a force pulling at me, dragging me deeper into its clutches. And then I saw something. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Nina, but it wasn't the Nina I had known. She was sitting on a horse, just like me, her face twisted and pale, her eyes completely empty, staring ahead with a glassy, lifeless gaze. Her body didn't move, as if she were no longer human, as if she had become part of the carnival itself. Reached out, my heart racing in desperation, but before I could even shout her name, she was gone. The carousel had swallowed her whole. She had become another shadow, another forgotten soul trapped in this nightmare. I tried to scream, to beg for her to return, but the sound was lost. The carnival's laughter swallowed it whole. The horses' hooves pounded against the ground faster, the speed of the ride becoming unbearable. My body slammed against the seat, the cold metal cutting into my skin. The lights flickered, and I caught glimpses of faces, twisted faces, people who had been trapped in this place for years, their eyes wide with terror, their mouths open in silent screams. They were watching, waiting, their hollow eyes fixed. On me, a warning, a reminder. I was trapped. I was becoming one of them, and I didn't know how much longer. I could hold on before the carnival devoured me completely. The speed of the carousel reached its peak, and my world spun into chaos. I could feel the carnival's presence, its hunger, gnawing at me, pulling at my very soul. The laughter reached a fever pitch, deafening, overwhelming. And then, just when I thought I would lose myself to the madness, the lights went out. For a moment, everything was black. The ride had stopped. And then I heard something, a voice. You're mine now. When the carousel came to a sudden stop, I felt the world shift beneath me. The lights flickered, and the shadows crept back, curling and twisting into shapes that no longer felt like shadows at all. The once whimsical carnival had transformed into something dark, something alive with malice. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, and it felt like the carnival itself was watching me, waiting. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't cooperate. The shadows seemed to hold me in place, their tendrils curling around my legs, my arms. I was trapped, just like the others, those lost souls whose faces I had seen on the carousel. But now they were everywhere. Whispers filled the air, low and guttural, speaking in a language I couldn't understand, but the meaning was clear. They were calling to me. I turned to look at the man, the one who had led me here. His eyes were cold, hollow, like they belonged to something not quite human. He was standing just a few feet away, watching me with that same eerie expression, as if I were just another part of the carnival now. It's your turn, he said, his voice soft but chilling. The carnival wants you. I didn't know what that meant, but the fear in my chest grew. There was no escape. I had stepped into something far bigger than I had imagined. I heard the carousel's hum again. But it wasn't the playful sound I had heard before. Now it was louder, like a constant, throbbing beat beneath the surface of the ground. My body froze, the fear in my veins making it impossible to move. The man's voice echoed in my mind, and the shadows tightened their grip around me. I tried to speak, to ask him what was happening, but the words wouldn't come. My mouth was dry, and the carnival's screeching music filled the silence. It was like I was stuck in a dream, or maybe worse, a nightmare. And then, it happened. The carousel started moving again, but this time, it wasn't just spinning. It shifted, the horses moving in strange patterns, their eyes glowing brighter, their grins wider, more twisted. The man was still standing by my side, but I couldn't focus on him anymore. My attention was drawn to the ride, to the dark energy emanating from it. I could feel it pulling at me, trying to drag me toward it. I stumbled back, but my body moved as though it were not my own. It was being controlled by something else, something more powerful than my will. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't break free. I was back on the carousel, and this time there was no escaping. The man had disappeared into the shadows, and the laughter had stopped. In its place, a quiet, low hum resonated, like the carnival itself was breathing. The carousel spun faster, its horses glaring at me, their faces now monstrous, twisted into shapes that didn't seem human anymore. The air was suffocating, thick with something heavy, something that wasn't quite real. The ride seemed endless, spinning through time, through space, until I couldn't tell what was real anymore. My vision blurred, and the world around me became a whirlpool of distorted images. Faces appeared and vanished, lost souls, trapped in this twisted carnival for eternity. I could feel myself slipping away, falling deeper into the carnival's grasp. The air around me grew colder, and the carousel's speed began to warp reality. Everything around me became an incoherent blur, flashes of light and shadow that didn't make sense. I was surrounded by the carnival. Inside it now nothing was. Outside of it, I was becoming part of it. The carousel came to an abrupt stop. My body jerked forward, but this time I wasn't just shaken. Something inside me had broken, and I felt it. A part of me had crossed over into the darkness. My heart was no longer mine. My thoughts weren't my own. I could feel the presence of others now, figures lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting. The carnival was not just a place. It was a living thing. A monster. It had consumed so many, and now it had consumed me. The man's voice whispered in my ear, "You're mine now." I wanted to scream, but no sound came. There was no escaping. The carnival. It had claimed me, and I knew, deep in my soul, that there would never be an end. I was trapped in its grasp forever. The carousel began to spin again,